A big thank you to all the subscribers. I hope 2025 is going to be even better. You show up and you support me every time I load a video. I am going to react on this video and then let you listen to it. Please kindly subscribe and comment on it. Comments always do start a conversation. This is based on a true story that happened in Chicago. The names have been changed to protect individuals involved in it. This story is shocking and heartbreaking at the same time. It is hard to fathom how someone would go to such extreme lengths to hurt another person. This is about a pastor who contacted HIV from his secretary. Just think about it. This is a pastor who is living on tithes and offerings from people who trust him as a messenger or representative of God. This is a pastor who is supposed to support and guide the community. This is the pastor who is using church money for payoffs and cover-ups. And to top it all, his wife is not enough. He felt the need to branch somewhere else to top up needs. This idiot also believed that God would protect him from catching any illness in the process. This story is a lesson for all men. Not all that glitters is gold. This story is more about the power, sexuality, and accountability in religious spaces. We have heard about abuses in some of the churches, and it continues 2025. As a young Christian years ago, I was indeed naive to think or believe that all folks that attended church were all baptized and saved. I believed they were all filled by the Holy Spirit, and all stood by the Word of God. I believed all abided by the principles and commandments of the Bible. I also believed they would never cause harm to others. Thankfully, as I grew up, I realized how horribly wrong I was about church Christians. I guess one thing is very clear: God cannot be mocked regardless of whether one is a pastor or not. Please kindly subscribe.
The story begins in the summer of 2021 at New Life Baptist Church, one of Chicago's largest African-American congregations. Located in the heart of the South Side, the church's gleaming facade and state-of-the-art facilities stood as a testament to its prosperity under the leadership of Pastor Jerome Mitchell. At 45, Pastor Mitchell cut an impressive figure, tall, athletic, with a winning smile that had graced countless local TV appearances and charity events. His sermons packed the 3,000-seat sanctuary every Sunday. His marriage to Diane Mitchell, a prominent real estate developer, was held up as a model of black excellence. But behind the polished exterior, darkness lurked. Melissa Jackson started working as Pastor Mitchell's executive assistant in January 2021. At 32, she was smart, capable, and carried a devastating secret. She'd been HIV positive since a relationship in her mid-20s with a man who knew his status but didn't disclose it. The moment I met Pastor Mitchell, something felt off, Melissa later told investigators. The way he looked at me, like I was something to consume. But I needed this job. My mother was sick, bills were piling up, and the pay was too good to walk away from. The first inappropriate comments started subtly. "That dress looks nice on you, Sister Jackson. You should wear your hair down more often. Has anyone ever told you what beautiful eyes you have?" Melissa tried deflecting. "Thank you, Pastor. I should get back to those donation reports." But the comments escalated to accidental touches, a hand on her lower back, fingers brushing her arm, standing too close while reviewing documents. By March, he was finding reasons to keep her late. "Sister Jackson, I need help preparing Sunday's sermon. Could you organize these counseling files? No one will disturb us at this hour." One evening, he closed his office door. "Melissa, I think we both feel this connection. God brought you here for a reason." She backed away. "Pastor Mitchell, you're married. This isn't right." "The heart wants what it wants. Haven't you felt it too? I need to go." That's when he grabbed her arm. "Think carefully about your next move. A lot of people would love this position. It would be a shame if your performance reviews started suffering." Melissa pulled away, heart pounding. She had responsibilities, her mother's medical bills, her rent, her own HIV medications that insurance barely covered. The next day, she requested a transfer to the church's administrative office. Denied. She asked to adjust her hours to avoid late nights. Denied. She started documenting every interaction, saving texts, recording conversations when possible. In April, Pastor Mitchell called her into his office. "I'm concerned about your attitude lately. Perhaps this isn't the right fit anymore. Are you firing me? Let's call it a mutual parting, unless..." The implication hung heavy in the air. Melissa left in tears. That night, she stared at her HIV medication bottle, a plan forming, a terrible, vengeful plan. The next day, she called Pastor Mitchell. I'm sorry about yesterday. You're right. There is a connection. Maybe we could talk about it over dinner? His eager response made her stomach turn. I knew you'd come around. I have a discreet place in mind. As she hung up, Melissa whispered, God forgive me. The restaurant was in Evanston, far from their usual circles. Pastor Mitchell had reserved a private booth under the name James Smith. Melissa arrived wearing the red dress he'd once complimented, her heart heavy with purpose. You look stunning, he said, eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Over wine he shouldn't have been drinking. As a Baptist minister, he laid out his rules. No communication through church channels. Never be seen together in public near the church. If anyone asks, she was rehired as a remote consultant. His wife was not to be mentioned. I have a reputation to protect, he explained. This stays between us. Melissa nodded, thinking of the voice recorder in her purse. Of course, discretion is important to me too. The affair began that night at a boutique hotel. Melissa had researched thoroughly. In Illinois, knowingly transmitting HIV was a Class 2 felony. She needed evidence that he initiated everything, that she had no intent to harm at first. She told him early in their employment relationship that she didn't date married men due to religious beliefs. She had documentation of his harassment and coercion. Most importantly, she had proof she tried to quit rather than submit to his advances. Later, lying awake in the hotel bed, she watched him sleep. Pastor Jerome Mitchell, pillar of the community, serial adulterer, about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Back at her apartment, she wrote in her journal, Day 1 of the plan. Evidence secured, hotel receipt, voice recordings, text messages. He never asked about protection, never asked about my sexual health, just took what he wanted like he always does. Over the next weeks, a pattern emerged. Tuesday and Thursday evenings were counseling sessions. Sunday afternoons were ministry planning. His wife Diane's real estate work kept her traveling frequently. Melissa played her role perfectly, the reluctant church girl who'd finally given in to temptation. She let him think he was corrupting her while she documented everything. At church, they maintained professional distance, but she noticed things now. How his eyes lingered on other young women, the private counseling sessions with single mothers, the way he used spiritual manipulation to control people. God has blessed me with discernment about you, he'd tell her in private. This is his plan for us. She thought of the other women who must have heard those same lines over the years. June arrived with complications. Diane Mitchell started spending more time at church, watching her husband with suspicious eyes. Rumors spread about why Melissa had really returned to her job. One Sunday, Diane cornered her in the ladies' room. I've seen how he looks at you. Melissa's heart raced. Mrs. Mitchell, save it. You're not the first. Just know this. I built half of what he has. I'm not going anywhere. That night, Melissa called her cousin Rachel, a nurse who knew her status. I'm in too deep. You need to stop this madness, Rachel urged. He's not worth destroying your life over. He already tried to destroy my life, tried to force me into this. Now he needs to learn actions have consequences. Meanwhile, Pastor Mitchell grew bolder. He started calling late at night, sending explicit texts demanding more of her time. My wife's going to a conference next week, he told her after a Wednesday Bible study. Come to the house. Your house? Isn't that risky? I want you in my bed. I'm tired of hotels. Melissa felt sick but saw an opportunity. What about pictures? Security cameras? Disabled them myself. No one will know. She saved that text. The next day she had lunch with her mother, who was recovering from cancer. Baby, you seem troubled lately. Talk to me. Melissa forced a smile. Just work stress, Mama. Everything's fine. But nothing was fine. The weight of her revenge plot was crushing her spirit. Yet every time she considered stopping, she remembered his threats, his entitlement, his abuse of power. God works in mysterious ways, Pastor Mitchell liked to say. Indeed, he did. The summer heat matched the intensity of the affair. Pastor Mitchell grew increasingly reckless, taking risks that made Melissa's evidence gathering easier. His ego convinced him he was untouchable. Their first time at his house felt surreal. Melissa sat in her car outside the elegant Kenwood mansion, recording a timestamp on her phone. July 12, 2021, 8:45 p.m. Entering Pastor Mitchell's residence at his insistence. All security cameras are confirmed disabled. The master bedroom felt like a violation. Family photos on the walls, Diane's robe hanging in the bathroom, her perfume on the dresser. Pastor Mitchell didn't seem to notice or care. Afterward, lying in his wife's bed, Melissa asked carefully, "Aren't you worried? About diseases and stuff?" He laughed. "I'm a man of God. He protects his chosen ones." She documented that statement too. By August, Melissa noticed the first signs. Pastor Mitchell complained of fatigue during their encounters. Night sweats left his sheets damp. A persistent low fever made him irritable. "Must be that summer flu going around," he said, popping Tylenol. She watched him deteriorate with clinical detachment, recording every symptom. Swollen lymph nodes he blamed on stress, body aches dismissed as gym soreness, low-grade fevers attributed to Chicago's heat wave, night sweats he linked to bad dreams, weight loss he celebrated as successful dieting. During this time, his demands intensified. The power dynamic shifted as his health declined. He needed her more, trusted her more. She became his confidante, the keeper of his secrets. "Sometimes I think you're the only one who really knows me," he told her one night. If he only knew. At church, subtle changes appeared. His dynamic sermons grew shorter. He took more breaks, drank more water. The congregation whispered about his gaunt appearance. "Pastor's working too hard. That new diet is too extreme. He needs a vacation." Diane noticed too. Melissa overheard her in his office. "Jerome, something's wrong. You need to see a doctor." "I'm fine, woman. Stop nagging." But he wasn't fine. By September, the symptoms were undeniable. During one of their hotel meetings, he could barely perform, his body racked with chills. "Maybe we should take you to the ER," Melissa suggested, knowing what they'd find. No hospitals, just need rest. She wrote in her journal that night, "The virus is taking hold. He's experiencing classic acute HIV symptoms but refuses to acknowledge anything's wrong. His pride will be his downfall." Meanwhile, church politics intensified. Associate Pastor Marcus Thompson started handling more services. The deacon board called emergency meetings. Attendance numbers dropped slightly. People could sense something was off with their leader. Melissa maintained her professional facade, but inside she felt hollow. The weight of her actions haunted her. During Sunday services, during their intimate moments, during quiet nights alone with her thoughts. She attended HIV support group meetings, sharing carefully edited versions of her story. "I'm watching someone experience what I went through, but I can't help them." The group leader, an older woman named Miss Clara, seemed to see right through her. "Revenge might feel sweet at first, baby, but it poisons the soul." September brought more complications. Pastor Mitchell's symptoms became impossible to hide. During a televised sermon, he nearly collapsed at the pulpit. The video went viral in Chicago's church community. Diane finally put her foot down. "Either you see a doctor, or I'm calling one to the house." He chose a private clinic in the Gold Coast, far from prying eyes. Melissa knew what would happen next. She'd planned for it meticulously. The call came on a Tuesday evening. "I need to see you. It's urgent." His voice sounded broken. The private room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital felt small despite its luxury accommodations. Pastor Mitchell sat on the edge of his bed in a designer robe, medical charts scattered around him. His usual commanding presence had crumbled. "HIV positive," he said, voice hollow. "How is this possible?" Melissa maintained her practiced look of shock. "What? No, there must be a mistake. 3 tests, all positive, plus pneumonia starting in my lungs." His hands shook as he held the lab results. "I'm a man of God. This doesn't happen to men of God." She watched him spiral through the stages of denial in real time. "The tests are wrong. Someone at the lab made a mistake. This is spiritual warfare. The devil is attacking me." Finally, the question she'd been waiting for. "You need to get tested." Melissa pulled out her phone, displaying the HIV test results she'd gotten last week. Another piece of evidence showing she'd been responsible enough to get checked. "Negative," she said. "I'm clean." His relief was visible, followed immediately by suspicion. Then how? She watched the wheels turn in his mind as he mentally scrolled through other possibilities. Other women. Because of course there were other women. That night, Diane came to the hospital. Melissa listened outside the private room. "What do you mean, HIV? Jerome, I've been faithful for 20 years. "Diane, please, don't you dare lie to me. Not now. How many were there?" "I don't." "How many?" The argument continued until security asked Diane to lower her voice. She stormed out, mascara streaking her face, nearly running into Melissa. "Here to check on your pastor?" Diane's voice dripped venom. "Little late for office hours, isn't it?" Melissa stepped back. "Mrs. Mitchell, I was just dropping off some church documents." "Save it. I know what you've been dropping off." She moved closer. "But here's what you don't know. I've had private investigators following Jerome for months. Every hotel, every counseling session, every lunch date, I have pictures." Melissa's heart raced. "Mrs. Mitchell, I was gathering evidence for divorce court. Now I'm gathering it for criminal court. Because someone gave my husband HIV, and when I find out who..." She let the threat hang. After Diane left, Melissa sat in her car, hands shaking. This wasn't part of the plan. Private investigators meant photos, surveillance, evidence that could implicate her. She called Rachel. "The wife knows about the affair, has proof." "Jesus, Mel, this is getting dangerous. It was always dangerous, but now, you need a lawyer." "Not yet. If I lawyer up now, it looks suspicious." That night, she couldn't sleep. The weight of her actions crushed her chest. She thought about Miss Clara's words at the support group. Revenge poisons the soul. But wasn't that the point? To make him feel the poison she'd felt? The next few days brought chaos. Pastor Mitchell checked out of the hospital against medical advice. Emergency deacon board meetings ran late into the night. Diane moved out of their mansion into a downtown condo. Church attendance dropped as rumors spread. Local news vans camped outside New Life Baptist. Melissa maintained her routine, playing the concerned secretary. She attended staff meetings where they discussed pastor's health challenges. She helped craft careful statements about him taking time to rest and restore. But inside, storms raged. Every cough, every wince of pain from Pastor Mitchell needled her conscience. She watched him struggle with medication side effects, knowing exactly what he was feeling. One evening, he called her to his office. He looked gray, exhausted. "I need you to be honest with me." Her pulse quickened. "About what, Pastor? Did you know? About any of the others? Did they ever say anything?" The irony almost made her laugh. "No, Pastor. I never knew about anyone else." He nodded, defeated. "I've ruined everything. My ministry, my marriage, my life." "God forgives," she said, the words tasting like ash. "Does he? For this?" She left him there, staring out his office window at the Chicago skyline. In her car, she screamed until her throat hurt. The first newspaper headline hit like a bomb. "Prominent Southside pastor steps down amid health and scandal rumors." The Chicago Defender's article was careful, citing unnamed sources claiming Pastor Mitchell had HIV and multiple affairs. The comments section exploded with speculation and judgment. More coverage followed. "Megachurch in crisis. Pastor's illness raises questions. Diane Mitchell files for divorce, cites irreconcilable differences." New Life Baptist attendance plummets amid leadership scandal. The police became involved after Diane filed a criminal complaint alleging intentional HIV transmission. Detective Marcus Williams from Chicago PD's Special Victims Unit took the lead. Williams was a veteran investigator, 25 years on the force, the last 15 handling sensitive cases in the black community. He knew churches could be powder kegs of secrets. His first interview was with Diane Mitchell. "When did you first suspect your husband was unfaithful?" "Suspect? I've known for years. Jerome got sloppy, lipstick stains, late nights, mysterious charges. But I built this life with him. Leaving meant losing everything we'd worked for. And now someone tried to kill him with HIV. That changes things." Williams reviewed her private investigator's files. The surveillance photos showed Pastor Mitchell with multiple women over 6 months, but Melissa appeared most frequently. Next, he interviewed church staff. The pattern became clear. Young, attractive women hired as assistants or ministry coordinators, lasting a few months before quietly leaving. Former Secretary Janet Thompson broke down during questioning. He said God gave him special anointing to minister to broken women. Said physical comfort was part of healing. "I was divorced, vulnerable. When I threatened to tell, he said no one would believe me over a man of God." Williams compiled a list of potential victims. Janet Thompson, 2018, Kimberly Peters, 2019, Angela Wilson, 2020, Melissa Jackson, 2021, plus at least 5 others who refused to talk. But Melissa stood out. She was the only one who returned after leaving, The only one present during the HIV diagnosis. The only one still working closely with Pastor Mitchell. Williams requested her employment records. The pattern was suspicious. Hired January 2021. Resigned April 2021. Rehired May 2021 as special assistant. Salary doubled after rehiring her. He interviewed her at the station. "Miss Jackson, why did you return to work for Pastor Mitchell after resigning?" Melissa stayed calm. "He offered better terms. I had bills to pay, including private meetings at hotels." "I'm not sure what you're implying." "We have photos, Miss Jackson. The Hyatt, Drake, his house." She leaned forward. "Do you have photos of him threatening my job? Of him cornering me in his office? Or just the parts that make me look like a homewrecker?" Williams noted her defensive posture. "When were you diagnosed with HIV?" "That's private medical information. Not with a criminal investigation pending." Melissa called her newly hired lawyer, Vernon Walsh, ending the interview. Outside, Williams told his partner, "She's hiding something, but so is everyone else in this mess." The investigation expanded. Williams subpoenaed phone records, hotel receipts, church financial documents, medical records, surveillance footage. A pattern emerged through bank statements. Regular cash withdrawals by Pastor Mitchell, payments to various women coded as ministry support, a secret account funding hotel rooms and gifts. But the HIV transmission timeline proved harder to establish. Multiple women met multiple possible sources. Testing would be necessary, but many refused to cooperate. Meanwhile, Pastor Mitchell's health deteriorated. The medications helped, but stress and shame took their toll. He lost 30 pounds. His dark skin turned ashen. Rumors spread that he was dying. Diane's divorce filing became public record, detailing 20 years of infidelity, misuse of church funds, emotional abuse, sexual addiction, financial misconduct. The church board finally acted, voting to remove him as senior pastor. The announcement sparked protests from his remaining supporters. "Pastor Mitchell needs prayer, not punishment. Judge not, lest ye be judged." "The devil is attacking our church." But others celebrated. "About time someone stopped him. How many lives did he destroy? God don't like ugly." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Rachel, Melissa's cousin, couldn't live with the guilt anymore. She walked into Detective Williams's office early one November morning. "I have information about Pastor Mitchell's HIV infection." Williams leaned forward. "I'm listening." Rachel's hands shook as she spoke. "My cousin Melissa, she's been positive since 2017. She told me about Pastor Mitchell harassing her, threatening her job. When she went back to work for him," she paused. "She knew what she was doing. She intentionally infected him? She called it justice. Said he needed to learn how it felt to be violated." Williams pulled out his case file. "We need this on record. Start from the beginning." Rachel detailed conversations spanning months. Melissa's initial harassment complaints, the forced resignation, the revenge plan, the affair's deliberate initiation, the documented symptoms. "She kept journals," Rachel added. "Everything's written down. Dates, times, symptoms. She wanted proof it came from her." After Rachel left, Williams called the DA's office. This was now a clear case of aggravated assault with intent to transmit HIV, a Class 2 felony carrying 3 to 7 years. But they needed those journals. The search warrant was executed at Melissa's apartment while she was at church. Detectives found 5 notebooks detailing the affair, recorded conversations on USB drives, a folder of hotel receipts, screenshots of text messages, Pastor Mitchell's medical timeline. The most damning evidence came from her personal journal. April 15th, 2021. "He fired me today for refusing him. Thinks he can throw me away like trash. But I have something for him. A gift that keeps on giving." May 3rd, 2021. "Started the plan today. He's so eager, so careless. Never even asked about protection. His arrogance will be his downfall." July 20th, 2021. "First symptoms showing. He's too proud to see a doctor. Just like I was too ashamed when it happened to me." September 28th, 2021. "Diagnosis confirmed. He cried like a baby. Where was this humanity when he was destroying other women's lives?" Williams arranged surveillance on Melissa. She seemed to sense the net tightening, changed her routine, switched cars with friends, made calls from burner phones, met with her lawyer frequently. The church atmosphere grew tenser. Anonymous letters appeared in the church office. Sister Jackson has HIV. Check the secretary's medical records. She did this on purpose. Diane Mitchell's private investigators connected more dots. Melissa's regular HIV clinic visits, her support group attendance, medical records showing her 2017 diagnosis, credit card charges for HIV medications. Then came another witness. Angela Wilson, a former victim of Pastor Mitchell, came forward. Melissa told me her plan last spring. I didn't stop her. Maybe that makes me guilty too, but after what he did to me, to all of us, I understood. Did she specifically mention infecting him? She said, he thinks HIV is punishment for sin. Let's test that theory. The DA's office prepared charges. The evidence was substantial. Rachel's testimony, the journals, medical records, surveillance photos, witness statements, recorded conversations. But the case was sensitive. A prominent black pastor, a violated woman's revenge. The racial and gender politics were explosive. Local media caught wind of the investigation's direction. Pastor's HIV infection may be criminal act. Church secretary under investigation. Revenge plot rocks Southside congregation. The black community divided. Some supported Melissa, he had it coming. Others defended the pastor. Two wrongs don't make a right. Many just wanted it to go away. This makes us all look bad. They arrested Melissa after Sunday service, waiting until she left church grounds to avoid a scene. Detective Williams approached her in the parking lot. Melissa Jackson, you're under arrest for aggravated assault with intent to transmit HIV. She didn't resist, just smiled sadly and said, I wondered when you'd figure it out. The charges were formal. 1 count aggravated assault, class 2 felony. 1 count criminal transmission of HIV. 1 count reckless conduct. Bail was set at $250,000. The church paid it anonymously. Her lawyer, Vernon Walsh, crafted their defense strategy around 3 points. Prior sexual harassment and coercion. 2. Pastor Mitchell's history of predatory behavior. 3. No definitive proof she was the source of infection. The arraignment drew media attention. Melissa wore a conservative gray suit, hair pulled back severely. Pastor Mitchell attended in a wheelchair, looking frail. Assistant DA Sarah Rodriguez laid out the state's case. The defendant methodically planned to infect the victim with HIV. She documented her intentions. She tracked his symptoms. This was calculated biological assault. Walsh countered, my client was sexually harassed, coerced, and threatened by a man who abused his power. If transmission occurred, it was during acts he initiated through corruption of authority. The judge set a trial date for March 2022. Meanwhile, civil suits multiplied. Diane Mitchell sued Melissa for alienation of affection. Church members filed a class action over exposure risk. Former victims sued the church for enabling abuse. The church board sued Pastor Mitchell for mismanagement. January brought complications. More women came forward with stories of Pastor Mitchell's abuse, spanning decades. But they also revealed something crucial, other HIV exposures. Detective Williams interviewed Kimberly Peters. He infected me in 2019. I was too ashamed to report it. Angela Wilson. I tested positive 6 months after our affair ended in 2020. The timeline suddenly blurred. Had Melissa infected Pastor Mitchell, or had he already been positive, infecting her and others? DNA testing of the virus could prove transmission direction, but samples from 2017 weren't available. The scientific evidence was inconclusive. Pastor Mitchell's health stabilized with proper treatment. He held a press conference. I admit my sins. I failed as a husband, a pastor, and a man of God, but I never intended to harm anyone. What Sister Jackson did was calculated evil. Melissa's support group rallied around her. Miss Clara spoke to reporters. That man preyed on wounded women for years. The real crime is how long the church protected him. The case sparked national debates about HIV criminalization laws, church accountability, sexual abuse in religious institutions, the ethics of revenge, power dynamics in spiritual communities. February brought pretrial motions. Defense wanted to admit Pastor Mitchell's abuse history, church cover-up documents, victim testimony spanning 15 years, evidence of other HIV exposures. Prosecution sought to exclude prior sexual harassment claims, church politics, Diane Mitchell's private investigator findings, other victims, HIV status. The judge allowed most evidence, ruling the pattern of behavior was relevant to state of mind. As the trial approached, both sides felt the weight of what was at stake. This wasn't just about HIV transmission anymore. It was about power, justice, revenge, and redemption. The trial opened on a cold Chicago morning. News vans lined South Martin Luther King Drive. Protesters on both sides carried signs, "Justice for victims. HIV is not a weapon. Church corruption kills. Pray for Pastor Mitchell." Inside, Assistant DA Rodriguez began. "This case is about intentional harm. The defendant weaponized her HIV status to punish a man she blamed for her pain. She documented every step, every symptom, watching him suffer with calculated satisfaction." Vernon Walsh responded, "This case is about power and predation. Jerome Mitchell used his position to abuse women for decades. When one fought back, he called it crime. But you'll hear how he infected others long before Melissa Jackson entered his life." The prosecution's case seemed strong. Rachel's testimony about Melissa's plan, the detailed journals, medical records, surveillance photos, recorded conversations. But cross-examination revealed complexities. Rachel cracked under questioning. "Did your cousin explicitly say she intended to infect Pastor Mitchell?" "Not exactly. She said he needed to understand the consequences." The medical timeline proved problematic. Dr. Sarah Chen, infectious disease specialist, testified, "Given multiple sexual partners and the virus's mutation rate, we cannot definitively determine who infected whom. The pattern suggests Pastor Mitchell may have been positive before 2021. Former victims strengthened the defense. Kimberly Peters described her 2019 infection. "He refused protection, said God would keep us safe. When I tested positive, he ghosted me. The church paid me to stay quiet." Angela Wilson's 2020 experience echoed this. "After my diagnosis, he said I must have gotten it from someone else. Called me a Jezebel. Threatened to expose me if I talked." The prosecution's timeline unraveled. If Mitchell infected others in 2019 and 2020, he couldn't have gotten HIV from Melissa in 2021. Diane Mitchell's testimony proved unexpectedly helpful to the defense. "Jerome had symptoms before Melissa came back to work. Night sweats, weight loss. I thought it was stressful. He refused the doctors then too." The journals remained damaged. Walsh addressed them directly. "Miss Jackson, please explain these entries." Melissa spoke publicly for the first time. "I was angry, humiliated. He used his power to abuse me, then discarded me. I've gotten HIV from Melissa in 2021. Diane Mitchell's testimony proved unexpectedly helpful to the defense. "Jerome had symptoms before Melissa came back to work. Night sweats, weight loss. I thought it was stressful. He refused the doctors then too." The journals remained damaged. Walsh addressed them directly. "Miss Jackson, please explain these entries." Melissa spoke publicly for the first time. "I was angry, humiliated. He used his power to abuse me, then discarded me. The journals were revenge fantasy, but I didn't give him HIV. He gave it to me like he gave it to others." Why return to work for him? To gather evidence, to prove his pattern. The affair was wrong, but I wanted proof of what he did to women. The prosecution struggled to prove intent. Without clear transmission evidence, the case weakened. Then came the church documents. Years of complaints, payoffs, and cover-ups. Deacon board minutes showing they knew about HIV exposures, but kept quiet to protect the ministry. The jury deliberated for 4 days. The verdict, not guilty on all counts. The judge addressed Melissa. "While your actions showed poor judgment, the evidence doesn't support criminal charges. This case highlights the complexity of power, abuse, and retribution in our institutions." Aftermath rippled through Chicago's Black church community. New Life Baptist split, with half the congregation following Associate Pastor Thompson to a new ministry. Diane Mitchell's divorce settled out of court. The church board resigned en masse. Multiple civil suits ended in confidential settlements. Pastor Mitchell moved to Atlanta, starting a restoration ministry. State lawmakers proposed reforms to HIV criminalization laws. Melissa left Chicago, moving to Milwaukee to start fresh. Her final journal entry read, "The truth is messy. We were all victims and villains. He destroyed lives with his abuse. I wanted revenge, but found only emptiness. May God forgive us all." Miss Clara's words proved prophetic. Revenge had poisoned everyone it touched. The story became a cautionary tale about power, sexuality, and accountability in religious spaces. But for those involved, it was about human frailty. The the capacity for both cruelty and compassion, destruction and redemption.